A Woman's Reaction to No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert A. Glover. This is our first week with the kids back in school. It's been hectic. I'm sure I look like shit. I'm sure that there are those of you who will leave their comments regarding that, my overall shittiness in the comments. Feel free. I don't know when I'm gonna sleep, and that's where I am right now. So, shall we? Take everything written about nice guys in this book, their shame, their sacrifice of self, their approval seeking, their doing the opposite of what works, their indirectness, their caretaking, their covert contracts, their controlling behavior, their fear, their dishonesty, their difficulty receiving, their dysfunctional relationships, their loss of masculine energy. Now put them all in a great big container, shake them up, open the lid, look inside, and you'll have a pretty good view of how nice guys do sex. He doesn't really paint a pretty picture here. I feel bad because it's not a flattering book, and it's not necessarily supposed to be a flattering book. It's a book about, self-revelation and self-improvement, and so the picture you get when you first start the journey described by this book is not going to be pretty, and you kind of have to take the time to realize that it's not going to be pretty. But it's still kind of, I feel bad reading this because it's like, the poor guys who listen to this are going to think that it's just not flattering. This is so important, I will say it again. All nice guys have shame and fear about being sexual and about being sexual beings. I don't doubt him when he says that that's important. I don't know how to elaborate on that information, but it does seem to be kind of one of the key ideas in this chapter. So there you go. Avoidance of sexual situations and sexual opportunities prevents nice guys from getting the sex they want. As odd as it may sound, nice guys find many creative ways to avoid sex. Well, considering as how a lot of the tactics that nice guys, as described by Dr. Glover, have employed to get sex really don't work, I'm not inclined to doubt him. I have developed a theory that states the nicer the guy, the darker the sexual secrets. I can kind of see that. Like, I grew up in this extremely fundamentalist, conservative Christian area, like really extreme. And Christian fundamentalist extremists, as far as I've met them and as far as I know them, they're not like violent people, and they're not really horrific people. They're just really, really hypocritical people. And they don't necessarily feel comfortable around things that are true. There were so many kids. Like I went to high school with these kids, and I remember just they had the face that they put out to the public. They had the way they acted to the public. They had this whole facade that they presented to the public. And they weren't necessarily nearly as nice as they portrayed themselves to be, which was not a good thing. Not a good thing. And then I was, pretty honest and pretty straightforward about who I was, and pretty honest and straightforward about my flaws as well. And so they thought I was just awful, but I really didn't have any secrets. And they had secrets. Women consistently tell me that even though they may be initially drawn to a nice guy's pleasing demeanor, over time they find it difficult to get excited about having sex with him. Often the partner feels defective, but it is really not her fault. There is just very little about the nice guy persona to flip a switch or arouse a prospective partner. Maybe that's why I didn't spend a lot of time around nice guys. Like, I definitely wanted to avoid boredom. My goal was to have a lifelong partner, and I looked at it and was like, okay, if I'm going to have someone that I'm going to be with for the rest of my life, I can't go getting bored with them, 6 months down the road. Cat break. This person will have to be someone that I can continue to be excited about every single year for many, many years, every single day of every single year. And, that's a very simple thing to say and a surprisingly difficult thing to actually find or locate, because most people are just people. And, you know, I can understand why a lot of my friends said that I was looking for something that didn't actually exist. The wife of a nice guy in her late 20s shared with me how her partner would pester her for sex. When she would say no, he would pout and withdraw. I knew a guy who used to whine like an upset puppy or a hungry dog. He would literally whine at me when I told him I didn't want to have sex with him. This was the guy who bought me the perfume that I didn't want. It smelled horrible. I took it because I was trying to be polite and he wouldn't take no for an answer. I didn't want it. I ended up regifting it to someone else. It was not a good thing. No, this was not one of those situations where I was just so happy to be getting attention. This was not that kind of situation. This was a guy who was constantly making overtures, and I was constantly telling him, we're not going to have sex. And he would literally whine at me like a dog. I don't know how many things in my life I've encountered that have been more of a turnoff. Internalized shame and fear are the greatest barriers to a satisfying sex life. A man can read all the books he wants on how to pick up women, or watch all the instructional videos on improving sexual technique. None of these things will help him as long as he has shame and fear about being sexual or being a sexual being. Well, that sounds relatively profound. I'm trying to think of any time in my life when I've had shame about being a sexual being. Obviously, with my life history, that's probably not something I'm going to be able to find easily. Obviously I don't necessarily want people to know what turns me on and everything, but I've never been ashamed of anything. It's just, it's private, but it's not something that bothers me. And I can't imagine living with shame about things that I find exciting. I think that would be kind of a terrible burden to carry. And so, yeah, I feel kind of bad for people who have to struggle with that. It sounds terribly unpleasant. Taking matters into their own hands helps nice guys get the sex they want. Okay, I have a dirty mind, and when I read that, it totally sounded like he was saying masturbation or referring to masturbation, but I know I have a dirty mind. And so, yeah. Just me then. Before nice guys can have exciting, passionate, and fulfilling sexual experiences with other people, they must learn how to have the same with themselves, by taking matters into their own hands, by practicing healthy masturbation. Recovering nice guys can change the most basic dynamics that shape the bigger picture of how they do sex. Okay, so I don't just have a dirty mind. He was talking about masturbation. Glad we cleared that up. So, yeah, when I read this paragraph, the thing that really came to me immediately was, this is one of those books that I think is either going to really resound, like really ring true for you, or it's really not. If you're a guy who has had to deal with these kinds of problems, I think that this book is really going to help you. Like, I'm not a psychological expert. I don't really know the finer details of how all this is put together, or how effective these techniques are going to be. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like a cheaply written or vapid kind of self-help book. It seems like these techniques are at the very least worth a try, and they probably will help you. If you have the kinds of problems that are described in this book. If you don't have the kinds of problems that are described in this book, you're probably going to be reaching a paragraph like this and thinking to yourself, what? So I mean, I think that's the way to figure out whether or not you're a nice guy who's struggling with any of the nice guy issues described in this book. Read the book, and if none of it makes any kind of sense to you, or none of it seems to apply to you in any way, then your chances are that this is not a problem that you have. If you read the book and you do the little exercises, because he's got exercises in every chapter that you can do, if you do that and it starts really making sense and everything starts clicking into place, this is probably a good book for you to have read. As for masturbation, I'm immediately tempted to say, well, I don't know anything about healthy masturbation. That's not true. But I don't really know anything about unhealthy masturbation. And I certainly don't know anything about masturbation when it comes to men, because men and women operate differently when it comes to arousal. And I don't know to what extent this works for other women, but he talks in here about, making sure that you're not slipping off into a fantasy when you're masturbating. And it's like, anytime I am having sex, the fantasy has to be there. I think it's just part of being a woman. It could just be, part of me being a particularly perverse woman. I have to have an idea in my mind before I even like head for the bedroom of what I'm thinking about, where I am inside my head. Like, I know that for women in general, what's going on in here is kind of almost more important than what's going on out here. And for me, it's just always seemed to work that way. That's what works for me. For a guy, it might not work like that. Shame, again, I don't really know. I don't have any kind of personal experience to draw from when it comes to experiencing shame about sex or being sexual. Obviously, that's not something I would want to do in front of like a crowd of people, which is really funny because I got naked and I danced around in front of crowds of people, but I didn't feel remotely sexual about that. Things that make me feel sexual, I've kind of reserved, well, for my husband, which you wouldn't think it would work that way, but that's how it works. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting idea. I don't know how well healthy masturbation or the practice of healthy masturbation would work. I'm sure it varies by individual and by situation. He talks a little bit about pornography addiction in here, which he's talking about breaking away from the fantasy and from unrealistic fantasies and just focusing more on what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what's going on in the here and now. And that sounds like good advice. Um, do I know all that much about it? I can't really say there's anything I can contribute to that point. Good sex consists of two people taking full responsibility for meeting their own needs. It has no goal. It is free of agendas and expectations. Rather than being a performance, it is an unfolding of sexual energy. It is about two people revealing themselves in the most intimate and vulnerable of ways. Good sex occurs when two people focus on their own pleasure, passion, and arousal, and stay connected to those same things in their partner. All of these dynamics allow good sex to unfold in unpredictable, spontaneous, and memorable ways. I mean, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Um, you do kind of have to go in there with a sense of your own self. You can't just base it all entirely on your partner. You do have to kind of have your own. You can't say agenda, but I mean any kind of covert agenda, any kind of secret plans, any surface thoughts, any surface clutter or confusion. You really can't do that. At least I can't. Um, not to get too far into the nitty-gritty details, but I pretty much agree with what he's saying. Consider going on a sexual moratorium. Consciously refrain from sex for a predetermined period of time. No matter what your sexual situation is, it can be a powerful learning experience. Most guys initially resist the idea, but once they make the decision to do it, they find it can be a very positive experience. This actually is something I know something about. I don't know much about it, but I do know that it can be an interesting kind of experience, and it can definitely help to kind of intensify the degree of sexual tension between two people. If you are reading this book and you read this chapter and think that he's advising you to quit having sex with your partner and just masturbate, you've missed the point. I can pretty safely say that if that's what you're taking away from this chapter, you've definitely missed the point. He's giving a few different strategies to deal with sexual shame, sexual embarrassment, sexual discomfort, and those strategies might not necessarily all work at once. You're not necessarily supposed to do them all at once, like, stop having sex with your partner and also masturbate. But I can see how, it's kind of switching up the sexual routine to kind of try and break from unhealthy habits. And so, that makes a lot of sense. It actually does make a lot of sense in that sense. Do I know all that much about these things? Never really tried it. Like, I mean, sexual moratoriums, I mean, I don't think I have the willpower. I don't think I have the willpower. Like, we could talk about it, but, why would I want to do that to myself? No. I can see though how that would be an interesting thing to do, because I can see even me and my husband playing around with something like that at some point, just to kind of create a sense of anticipation between each other. That might be fun. I wouldn't do it for a full 3 to 6 months, but then again, I wouldn't be doing it therapeutically. So, yeah. Interesting chapter. I did not think I was going to be making a video talking about masturbation, but here we are. And luckily, we didn't talk about it with too much, well, so far at least, puerile humor or immaturity. And so the next chapter, if I can look at that up here, if I can find it. So the next chapter is going to be Get the Life You Want, Discover Your Passion and Purpose in Life, Work, and Career. I don't think we're going to be talking about sex all that much in this one, but at the very least, we probably won't be talking about masturbation, which might actually be a good thing. I don't know if you can see it. My cat is jumping up underneath the camera. He's probably wobbling it around like crazy. Hopefully he's not. And I will talk to you guys next week.